Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Aaron Tanner, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Runs a company called Melodic Virtue, and they publish books, records and various other bits and pieces. He's a graphic designer, and very recently, 2025, possibly at the end of 24, brought out an amazing book on the Cardiacs, which is titled A Big Book and a Band and the Whole World Window. Available from, basically from their website. I'll give you the link in the notes below so you'll find it, and do check it out. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Aaron, it's over to you.
Yeah, I would say it was probably in high school. I'm from an area that's pretty isolated. There's, not much of a music scene here. So I was a little behind the curve on, discovering acts, but it was really when I came across the Butthole Surfers and the Residents. That's when I just became a massive fan of music, and, the music was so strange, both of them. I was just like, I have to keep discovering new things.
Yes, I got this. So that was quite an entry point. Most people was a little bit more tame than that, those two, but yours was
very extreme.
There was no sort of crawling up the path, was it? It was straight in there, straight there. So you didn't have any, like your family weren't into music, or you had older brothers who often sort of shaped these things?
No, unfortunately, I was the older brother. I have a younger sister by 3 years, and she likes some pop music here and there, but really, my family doesn't have much of an interest in music.
Yes.
I guess the only exception being when my mother was pregnant with me, she went to an Elvis concert, and so I went to an Elvis concert in utero.
Yeah, magic. God, that's quite, that's good enough, isn't it? That wasn't in
bad.
Vegas, was it?
No, I believe it was. Oh, it may have been here in Evansville.
Right. Was this the kind of the 70s period? That kind of.
Mm-hmm.
That was that.
Yeah,
that
it was mid 70s.
Right. So that was his kind of latter part of his illustrious career. So that was Elvis. So then you sort of dotted up on. So then was the 90s kind of was it the late 90s the Buttholes suddenly appeared in your life?
Right. So it was, I guess I didn't learn about them until probably they were signed to Capitol Records, Independent Worm Saloon, something like that, which I did really like that record. But it wasn't until I started working backwards from that and, started listening to like Locust Abortion Technician and everything. And then I was just like, there's nothing else in the world like this. And, instantly grabbed me.
Yes. So then did you, for the 90s, was it that case of that you got into, that kind of, I don't know, rap, metal, funk sound that sort of ended in sort of Woodstock 99? Was that your kind of era of sort of Soundgarden, Soul Asylum, Red Hot Chili Peppers? Did you sort of veer in that direction at all?
No, I mean, I got into Nirvana quite a bit. Got into punk, like a little bit, but it was mostly just like Dead Kennedys, Misfits. Really just started gravitating towards weirder things. Really liked Faith No More, Jane's Addiction.
Yes, there you go. So then, as the years come trundled on, when did when did music become sort of almost more than a passion, but sort of a career?
I guess it was early in my graphic design career. I was doing jobs for just like area businesses and everything, and it was fine, and it was all right. But I've always just been so passionate about music and music history and the visuals associated with music, album art and everything. And whenever I decided to strike out on my own, I just started hitting up bands just to see if, I could somehow break in. And being from an area where, you don't just see them walking down the street. I'm sending out a bunch of cold call emails, and I think I sent out 3. I can't remember who 2 of the bands were, but they both did not respond. However, I sent one to the band Ween, and they did respond. And it was Dean Ween, that responded to the email, and he checked out my website, said how much he liked everything, and then actually gave me a chance to do an album cover for him.
Blimey.
And then it led to I think I've been working with them for 22 years now.
God, that's fantastic. So did you go back to the history of sort of album art like Barney Bubbles and Roger Dean posters and Hypnosis, those guys from, Cambridge, London, who worked with people like Pink Floyd and various people like that? Did you become sort of obsessed with different albums and different artists and sort of explore that avenue?
Well, it was mostly like I focused strictly on the bands I was most interested in at the time, like Winston Smith from doing the stuff for Dead Kennedys, or the Residents, who was just doing all of it in house, or through collaborations with some of their friends, and then the Butthole Surfers. I mean, there was no information on any of their albums. You didn't know who the band members were. You didn't know who did their artwork. Turns out it was them. But yeah, just, studying all that stuff. And a lot of it was in a pre-digital age, and I was trying to imagine how they, came up with that stuff without the, modern tools that we have.
Yes. God, it's kind of interesting. It's a kind of fascinating period, isn't it? That Blast First world, and I think that's when I saw them live. Was when they were on Blast First Records. I seem to from memory.
Oh yeah,
that was quite something that time with Paul Smith. So then so you set up your company. Was that 2004? You decided to sort of begin this new adventure in your life.
Yeah. It was 2004.
And then, so then you worked with various people, including obviously the Buttholes and Ween. So then how did the Cardiacs come onto your radar?
So I guess it was about 2017. I ended up doing a freelance job for the Pixies, to do a coffee table book. And it was so well received, and I won a lot of awards for it, and decided to start doing publishing strictly. And instead of going to bands and trying to solicit work from them, I approached them as a partner, and like pay them royalties for using their intellectual property and so forth. But it wasn't until I think it was shortly before the pandemic. I was out in Utah doing some hiking, just for fun, and decided to see if there were any shows playing. Pinback was playing, and I'm good friends with Rob Crow, the singer and guitar player, and went to go visit him, and we were hanging out before the show. And he's like, "Have you ever heard of this band called the Cardiacs?" He's like, "You would absolutely love it." And I was like, "Oh no, I don't know anything about them." And then he just handed me his phone, and it was the music video for RES. And he's like, "You have to watch this." And sure enough, I did like it. But then pandemic happened. It sort of threw my business into turmoil. With like world paper shortages and all kinds of crap going on, and so kind of just like forgot about them a little bit, and it wasn't until recently where Rob brought them back up and was, he was like, "You should do a book on them." And then I reached out and got the ball rolling.
Yes. So what was that? Because Tim sadly passed away. So who did you contact from the band?
I was speaking with his brother, Jim.
Right. And said, and was it immediately received in a positive way?
Yeah. They were familiar with some of the other bands that I'd done books on, and they were getting ready to reissue all their records, and it seemed like there was some like upward momentum for the group. After several years of it, stagnating because of Tim's illness and then his death, and it kind of just seemed like an appropriate time to do a piece like that.
Yes. So when did that start? Was that 2000? Was that 21 that you started it, or 22?
That would have been. I'm so bad at spans of time. I think it was late 22, but we didn't fly over until I believe it was March of, or no, it would have been end of 23, November of 23, and then we flew over in March of 24.
Right. My God, so you worked fast on this publication.
I work incredibly fast. I typically try to crank out 1 to 2 books a year.
My God, that is really so. Because it's an extraordinary book and publication, and sort of tribute to a way to celebrate the band. So when you were sort of looking at it to begin with, and you had a blank page, what's your method of sort of starting it? And did you have an idea of how it was going to look, or how did that process happen?
I try not to go in with like a preconceived idea with each of the books that I do. I'll fly out, go through the band's personal archives, kind of see what's missing, source some of that from fans or collectors, whoever, and then just sort of take visual inventory and just try to find the common thread between all of the imagery. And that's when I start building a visual narrative. Once I see what's basically what the connective tissue of all the different images are, or is rather.
I guess you with a band like the Cardiacs, I mean, they have got quite a long time span, a lot of different members, quite a lot of output. So I guess that kind of helps. I mean, helps make you realise there's going to be enough material to sort of work with, and it's not going to be a bit of a struggle to fit it all in.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when I started with the Residents, I mean, they've been a band for over 50 years at this point. And so going into it, I knew it was going to have to be a multi-volume set. We've only made it to, I think the second volume ended in 97. So there's still at least a book or two left to do there.
Yes.
But with Cardiacs, I definitely wanted to, fit it all in one volume.
Well, I would imagine it keeps it neat. Yes, it's. I mean, I have to say, it's just been beautifully presented, and the style of it, and it makes. I mean, it does really help with the band as well, doesn't it? Because they're going to, obviously, you've got a print run. Was it 1500 you've done?
Yes.
And I guess will you ever reprint it, or will you just always keep it at 1500?
I usually leave that up to the fans. So with the Butthole Surfers, I did the same thing. It was a run of 1,500. They sold out very, very quickly. And then it got to the point where I started receiving almost an email or two a day asking for more. And so then I reissued it, did another, I think, 1,500. Those sold out, and then did an additional 500 to sort of pair with the upcoming film.
Yes, that's quite. Yes, that's quite an interesting process. But with the Cardiac, so did you contact all the members of the band and key fans as well at this stage at that period at the late 22?
Yeah, so I reached out to every member that the core members still had contact information for, to source testimonials and things. There was a few band members like Peter Tagg, who was there at the very beginning, who had some absolutely great early shots, a lot of which he took, and those were obviously great for the first chapter. But a lot of the stuff came directly from Tim's house.
Right. God, that must be. Do you love that archaeological digging? Is it something that you find particularly interesting?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, yeah, just to be able to go through all of that history and being able to see like, oh, I definitely want that because it looks cool, or I need this because it's it has some sort of like historical significance, like rejection letters from large record labels, things that most people had no idea even happened, well, definitely want to, keep all that stuff.
Yes, it must be, but it must be at times quite thrilling. I know there's a few historians that I love watching documentaries, and they get very sort of excited when they get their white gloves on and they're sort of looking at letters and pictures and documents from hundreds of years ago. So you must have a slightly similar feeling of knowing that these are things that probably, yes, you can piece it all together to make a publication, but individually they're just going to sort of wither away in a cupboard and then eventually get thrown into a bin, recycling or landfill. But one way or the other,
Right.
you've kind of created this amazing body of work and a piece of art from something that would have just, doesn't make much sense kind of individually, but put together, it suddenly comes together and you sort of celebrate the body of a band, really, don't you? The work of a band.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm also just preserving their legacy. I make sure to, I mean, everything's archived onto a hard drive, but then there's a backup hard drive that makes an exact copy of the original drive. But then I also upload to two separate clouds. So I have three backups of that original drive. And then I'm always happy to share all the stuff that I've collected with the bands, at no charge or anything, just so
Yes.
they have digital copies of everything I collected.
Fantastic. I love a person who backs up as much as we do.
I've
Multiple
lost.
multiple hard drives in different places, not even on the same property, and then Dropbox as well as another backup. And
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've lost everything twice, and thankfully that was prior to starting the publishing endeavor. So I never wanted to go through that again.
no, those little USB pens were. Well, yeah, we still got drawers of them, but I'm not sure if they still work. But they used to have a form of backup, which was very dodgy. So so physically then you turn up and you meet a band member or super fan, and then you've got the documents. Do you then scan them there and then? Do you have some scanning process, or do you take them away with you, or what do you actually do on that part of the operation?
It honestly just kind of depends on the circumstances. Sometimes it does make sense to do it on location. Sometimes the people just don't want me around, interfering in their lives, and so they thankfully trust me enough to take it, outside their home or their storage facility or whatever, and work on it, while I'm at an Airbnb or hotel or whatever. But it's a pretty intense process. It's I usually start working the second I wake up, and I just
Yes.
work all the way until it's time to go to bed, and then I just repeat the process, usually for anywhere from like 7 to 10 days straight.
Yes, God, that sounds a day well spent. So, do you have your computer and a scanner, Or do you don't? Because I mean, I've done a few projects where you just take photographs of things and just think, well, that will be enough. But I don't think in a publication like that you would get away with it.
No, so for cardiacs, I flew Rob Crow over to the UK with me for the first trip, and we had brought one scanner, and turns out there was so much material, just having one scanner was not enough, and so we sourced another one off eBay, and the lady that we were staying with, Mary from ABC, went and got it for us, and it was 2 scanners running at once.
God, that sounds like an industrial project.
It was pretty massive.
It was good. And then you got these really brilliant testimonials, members of Chumbawamba there, kind of. So how did you locate them? Not locate them, because that's probably easy, but how did you know that they were fans? How did that one sort of come about?
Just doing a lot of research, seeing, reaching out to all the different bands that they've played with throughout the years, people that have, brought them up in interviews, whether it's like from the 80s or 90s or whatever. And some of them are just stabs in the dark. I'm like, well, this band also makes really strange music. I'm going to reach out and see if, they're a fan, or, like for instance, I reached out to Danny Elfman, from,
Yes.
He, excuse me, he was in the first book on The Residents, and I thought, surely Danny Elfman's a fan of Cardiacs. I mean, just, it makes sense to me, at least. But he'd never heard of him.
That's sad, isn't it? There you go.
It really is. But the good news is
he bought a book.
Well, he didn't buy a book, but now he's checking out Cardiac. So it's helping, spread the word.
Yes, I do. I mean, it's interesting because, as I said at the beginning, when I first started doing these interviews, there wasn't a lot of interest. And then suddenly, looking to my left, there's all these books that have appeared, like people have done this book on the Texas, rock punk scene. There was a book came out. There was one on Boston. There's various ones on CBGBs, and then there's the Roxy in London. And then everybody in the last 3 years, I say everybody, that's a sweeping statement, but so many people have written their memoirs, haven't they, that have just been coming out. And it's kind of, and it's interesting because you've got Jim Thirlwell there from Fetus. And it's interesting because him and John Robb seem to be people who always appear on these documentaries, because there was a brilliant film that was released, I think it was last year or the year before, on the band called Rima Rima from 1979. That only lasted 8 months and did one EP, and they managed to still make a film, which was just amazing, because they obviously, various members went on to different bands, including, Adam and the Ants. And yes, and there was even a story of a person who makes perfumes, and he made a perfume that was based, because he had this thing called synesthesia, which is kind of where you listen to music and then it creates.
That's fascinating.
It is. It's fascinating. And so they had him, and obviously I had to go and check out what his life was. And he had all these perfumes which were basically inspired by bands on 4AD records. And I thought, wow, that's just, people have stories. I think that's the thing. And the 80s, and obviously the Cardiacs go into other decades, but there was a rich body of work that got made and then slightly just put in the cupboard as people got jobs or just had to move on and do other things. But then that body of work has started to come out, and, books, films, and obviously people like Cherry Red Records have put out all these compilations that seem to be coming out every month virtually on, either a city or a scene or a decade or a year. And it's kind of getting more and more obscure, but in a bizarre way, more popular, because I think for the fans who were there, it's kind of a nice chance to sort of hear the material and some other bits. And for people who are curious about the 80s or 90s and don't want the mainstream, it's even more interesting because it's kind of like presented beautifully, isn't it?
It really is. And there's also been a lot of institutional interest as well, which I find really fascinating. When I was doing that book on the butthole surfers, the Smithsonian reached out to me, and they were talking about how they really wanted to start collecting underground band artifacts. Where typically it was only mainstream artists, but now they're considering the underground as well. And then that sort of made me think, well, who else might be interested? And so I reached out to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they now have all of my books in their permanent collection. Same with the Smithsonian, and then even the Museum of Modern Art has 2 of my books in their permanent collections now.
Yes. What about the Las Vegas Punk Rock Museum that opened a couple of years ago? Did they, or have you reached out to them, or vice versa?
Yeah, they reached out to me, and they have. It might just be Butthole Surfers and I think it's Butthole Surfers and Face to Face are the only 2.
Yes, it's interesting, and there's also museums and traveling exhibitions, because we want to see. I mean, a few years ago, probably longer now, isn't it? Seeing David Bowie's, David Bowie's exhibition at the V&A, and then that went around the world. But then you realise that we're the generation who want to go to a museum and not look at Degas or the post-impressionists, but we want to see album sleeves from people.
Absolutely.
and authentic kind of, this is the jacket that Joe Strummer wore, or David Bowie, the suit that David Bowie, or this is the guitar. And it's like the thing that is going to get, not literally bums on seats, but, us waddling around the gift shop, wanting the souvenirs and the book. So it's interesting that you're kind of got that, you're on that zeitgeist, really, aren't you?
Yeah, I think the underground scene is every bit as much important, if not more so, than a lot of things that are in popular culture. Typically, the underground informs like pop music and things. So it makes sense.
Yes. So when you just going back to that process then, so you come to the UK, scanning for the love of scanning for sort of nearly 2 weeks with 2 scanners, 24/7 nearly, and then you got the material, then you fly back to America, and then do you then sort of sit there in your studio and then just work on getting the publication up and designed?
Yeah, so typically the next step is to start sorting through all those images. Not most, but a lot of them are scanned in pieces, so I have to stitch them together in Photoshop. I assign every file a number based on the date or approximate date it's from. And then I file all of those into folders by year. And then I start to look and see, how the chapters are going to break down based on the amount of material I have for specific years and that sort of thing. And then once all of my files are organized, sit down and start building the book. And thankfully, doing all that work ahead of time allows me to just really just hit the ground running and just start knocking out multiple pages a day.
Yes. So a book, this has got 300 pages then. So once you've got that process and you've got everything sort of lined up, I'm just fascinated, by the way. How long then, and you're sitting there, how long then is it from day one to, when you think that's basically it, I've done it?
So typically under ideal circumstances, I can produce the book in about 6 to 8 weeks. Unfortunately, with cardiacs, there were so many delays, and I was really trying to get this out before Christmas. It didn't happen. It came out on January 3rd, but I tried so hard to get it done. And so I reduced the amount of time it took to 4 weeks. And it was definitely the most intense 4 weeks I've ever done when doing a book. And it was a little more difficult too, because not only is this a band I'm not as familiar with, not having grown up with them, but they're not as documented as some of the previous bands that I've done. And so there's no looking at an image and just Googling it to see, roughly what it is. I have to reach out to a lot of past band members or, super fans, that sort of thing. And, between all of us try to at least assign a year to it,
Yes, God, that must be quite stressful. You must have been having a bit of a tricky latter part of the year, really, for sort of getting all that sort of finalised. Yes.
I drank pretty heavily.
Yes, any healthy eating habits were going out the window, weren't they, really? Yes.
Right, lots of chips.
Lots of chips. Yes, snack attack. Yeah. I mean, it is, again, I know it sounds a bit of a cliche, but it has been so beautifully put together and compiled and done.
Thank you.
I mean, I just, it's a work of art in itself, actually, and such a celebration of a band. And, it is stunning. It's absolutely stunning. I mean, from a person who obviously sort of found them a bit later, and I have to say, so did I. So they weren't. I mean, during that period, as I sort of, in my defence, is that even if you wanted to hear a band, it wasn't always possible. You couldn't get and stream it in the 80s or 90s. Sometimes you had to,
sure.
It wasn't just like, oh, I'll go and quickly get it. And invest in, £5 or £6, say, on a vinyl record on the off chance that, a review was going to be enough to make you think, yeah, that was the album of the week. And we all went, oh, God, that's a terrible. What was that journalist thinking? How many drugs did they give him? That kind of thing. It was always a little bit tricky, so you just didn't have that access completely. I mean, we had the great John Peel and we had the music papers, but you still couldn't hear 20 seconds of a band before committing, and sometimes you just went, no, that band's just gone. Yep, that. So interestingly, I've sort of gone back and rediscovered, or not rediscovered, just discovered lots of new music, which has been fascinating for myself because yes, you thought, well, I'm not living in the past. Well, I am, obviously, but it's not. I'm not reliving my youth because I wasn't listening to this music at the time. But a band like the Cardiacs and a lot of other bands, mostly beginning with the letter C, bizarrely, like the Comsat Angels and the Chameleons, bands that slightly passed me by the first time. So there you go. That's it. So then, once you thought, that's it, I've finished it, where do you get it all printed and pressed and sorted from that point of view?
So the records were manufactured. Well, all my books come with a single on the back with an unreleased song or two. So the records were manufactured in Germany at Optimal, and then the books were manufactured in. Why am I drawing a blank? I was even talking about it yesterday. Manufactured in Lithuania. So,
right.
So then, have all the records shipped to Lithuania so they can all be collated there. Then, some were shipped to UK, some were shipped to the States.
Wow, you really have got a lot of Excel spreadsheets there, haven't you?
Yeah, I have a few.
God, that is a hell of a bit of... God, that is just a masterful sort of organising here, isn't it? You just is there a kind of any moments which give you sleepless nights on that kind of logistic front?
Yeah, I have to take something each night to sleep. Otherwise, I'll just lay there and stir and. I mean, finishing the book, it feels so great to finally be done with it and everything, but it's also one of the scariest points because that's when it's officially out of my control. I've done books before where the ship gets stuck in the dock and can't leave for a few weeks, or I've always joked one day, the container that has all my books in it's going to wind up in the bottom of the ocean, and they're going to have to reprint them all, and it's always something.
Yes, and obviously this isn't a Kickstarter thing. This is your business, and you put the money up, and then you just Yes, wait for it all to
Fingers
happen
crossed and hope for the best.
and hope for the best. And generally, has it all been sales-wise? I mean, out of 1,500, this is only January. Is it all looking like, yes, this is all good?
Yeah, sales for this book have been really strong. I was kind of curious to see, um, how well it would do. I figured it would do fairly well because there's a really active group on Facebook of Cardiacs fans, and figured word would travel that way for sure. But we've actually been getting some pretty solid press, and
Yes.
have some great press coming out, I think, in a week or two. And yeah, I've been really surprised on that front. Usually, the press isn't so kind to me, much like the Cardiacs.
Is it because you're an independent, like you don't have somebody who's schmoozing other people, or is it, I mean, the book's amazing, so I just can't, is it just that they prefer people who are who can sort of, I don't know, give them more treats, or why would they?
I think they misunderstand the intent behind the book. I consider myself to be, an archivist or like visual historian. And they're thinking they're getting a biography, but for the most part, the visuals tell the story. And then the testimonials and anecdotes that, some of their like notable friends or notable fans contribute, help add context to those. But there isn't a huge narrative. It's largely a picture book for adults.
Yes, and who doesn't like one of them? I mean, doing it. I mean, was there anything intriguing that you discovered about the band or something that was particularly fascinating that slightly sort of amused you or sort of made you dig deeper into certain areas?
One thing that I was impressed by, and it's not really represented in the book, is all of the sheet music that Tim had. There was just suitcases full of all of this music he's written. And, I can't read music. I'm a musician myself, but I play by ear. Rob's the same way. And literally everyone that was around us couldn't read sheet music. So we didn't even know what a lot of it was. There was a few pieces that were labeled, but I didn't know if, these are all songs that have been released, or maybe songs that, he discarded and opted not to record, or works in progress. I have no idea.
Yes, it's interesting because I think over the years I've managed to. Yeah, I've interviewed a few members of the band. Oh yeah, there was a guy, Christian, goes by Bick.
Yeah, I met Vic.
Bick, he was just amazing. But that was because, bizarrely, my partner really knew a very early band and saw them at Glastonbury called Ring. That probably only
Oh
released
yeah.
a few cassettes. I don't know what else they recorded. And then there was William as well, William Drake, a very distant cousin of Nick Drake, and then also John Paul as well. So it was kind of interesting getting their stories and hearing it, because again, yeah, the way that that community of musicians. I did an interview with a guy in Scotland yesterday from a Scottish band called Stitchback, and again, it's the way that creative period worked. A lot of people could just focus 100% on music, sign on the dole, get social security, stuff like that, or at the most get a little part-time job, but they didn't really have massive debts and bills to pay, and thus, could sort of focus on being creative so much of the time. So I think it does help, and like going back to that period, you realize why so many people created so much music at that period, because they could just focus so much of, most bands I found have a 5-year narrative. They get together, have 12 months, rehearse them, they get a single, John Peel plays it, they get a John Peel session, they get an album. The UK, as you can tell, is tiny, so they've all these little venues around the place. They play those in, getting their little transit van. They get a couple of albums and voila. And then sometimes other things to develop. But, they can have a solid body of work and feel like they were a full-time musician during that period, which is fascinating. It's
Oh, absolutely.
And so when with the cardiacs, sorry, I'm just rambling there. What did you was there a particular period that you liked of their music as well? Was there a particular album that you thought that is brilliant? Did you grow to love the music?
Yeah, so I focused on, sort of that earlier era. I guess like right after they were cardiac arrest, just because that's where Rob had me start. But once I sat down and really deeply listened to all the music, even the early cardiac arrest stuff, I found that I actually their later work resonates with me more than some of their more popular stuff. I think Tim started off, his writing was so brilliant and so just great, like right out of the gate. But he continued to grow. He never stagnated. He was always, improving upon ideas that he had previously, and it's just such a shame things went the way that they did, because who knows what he would be producing now.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it would have been a fascinating one, really. Yeah, I know. I mean, that song, "Is This the Life?" I just think that is. I mean, I know it's quite an early one and probably one of their most well known, but I still think it's got such an energy to it. And I love watching their videos and YouTube clips of various bits they've done as well. They're just absolutely extraordinary band. So, yes.
Those Seaside Treats videos are something else.
Yes, I know. I mean, I feel a bit embarrassed that I didn't ever get to see them live, but there you go, more confessional stuff. So with this project now just about done, obviously, what are you going to be working on for this year? Have you got some project on the go at the moment?
I do, but I unfortunately cannot talk about it. No agreements have been signed, or you know any of that. And I'm hoping to make some structural changes to the business, because I started this nearly 10 years ago, and I definitely had more energy 10 years ago. And I can only imagine what what I'm gonna feel like 10 years from now. And I need to take some breaks. I can't just keep doing literally everything. And yeah, so hopefully I'll get some infrastructure in place where I can actually relax a bit and not work 70 plus hours a week.
No, but then, I know it's bad for you, but us punters, it's glorious, isn't it, really? We, and yeah, just
Well, I'm glad you appreciate it.
oh God, absolutely. No, just all this work that people do, it's like, films that take, oh yeah, the one on Red Cross. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's a brilliant film, but I just couldn't believe when the director told me it was something like, I don't know, either 5 or 10 years, and it was all a bit, was it going to happen? And it does, and it comes out. If you get a chance, it's just fantastic film. It's just one of those movies, and you just, as an artist yourself, as a creative artist, you realise, God, that must have taken a lot of work and sleepless nights and gambling money to make it happen. But again,
Absolutely. And same with the upcoming Bottle Surfers film. Tom Stern, the director, he lives out in Los Angeles, and his home recently burned to the ground. The only thing left is the chimney and foundation.
Oh God.
And he was in the home stretch of finishing that, and it's supposed to debut at South by Southwest, and I think he is still going to be able to finish it in time. But it's talk about stress.
No, I can't quite picture. I imagine that would just be. I know the artistic community in LA must just be absolutely, yes. So much got lost.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of horror stories from friends.
I know, it's not good, is it? I know. I know a few years ago, I think Mick Garson, who was in David Bowie's band, playing keyboards, I think he, not on this fire, but a previous one, had lost a lot of stuff, and it would have been like really, yeah, unique material which would have gone. So yeah, my God, it's just too horrendous really to think about. But yeah, it's not good, is it? So but just on that, so oh yes, that was what I was going to say. So to get a copy in the UK or anywhere, what's the best way for people to locate, the place where you can say yes, buy one copy, submit now.
Yes, so I've partnered with Sandbag in the UK, Radiohead's people, and so if you go to melodicvirtue.co.uk, you can order a copy. I believe they're like just outside of London, so you're not going to have to pay import duties and excessive shipping costs and that sort of thing.
Yes, I know. We all get there. We think we're going to put that in our basket. It's good. Oh my God, P&P. That's double the price. It's just always so. Yeah, so there's none of that. It's just straight down £75. Voila. Well, and a bit.
Right.
God, it's a bargain. Yeah. Well, look. I hope all of them go, and I hope that yes, you've had a good experience and enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what your next publication could be. Well, hopefully.
Well, very much appreciated.
And on that bombshell, we leave it there. A massive thank you to Aaron for giving me the time for that interview, talk about the life in publishing, music, and much, much more. As I said, I will include a link in the publisher's website for you to buy a copy of this publication. On the Cardiacs, this has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on all the usual social media platforms sites, which are fascinating. And all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Indeed they have. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.